The following is a preview of a Patreon exclusive.
We've already talked about her, but Deidre Miro. We'll throw in Lonnie and Corv, and we can throw in anybody else as well that you want there. But I guess assuming let's go on a path here of success for Deidre. How would you define success for her so that there is an opportunity for her to continue to move up the corporate ladder, if you will, or at least maybe pick that up in season 2? How would you even define success? Is it capturing Andor? Is it turning into Luthen, or is it just any one of those people?
I think it's any one of those people, I think, is what you do. And again, it's more about at this point, while the Empire wants to catch them, the Empire is starting to understand that there is a broader net they need to cast, but they've got to identify particular people. But I think she's on this precipice, though. She's on this she knows that she's in a moment where she can feel like she's getting close, but she still has this void in between her and what these goals are. Krieger's an interesting one. I'm really interested to see how much of the Krieger spell house we're going to get, if any.
Right.
Because I think that's another big piece of that. How does that battle actually go? I think really, while she's not directly responsible for that mission or what's going on there, I think it's an extension of all of this that she's kicked off. Whether she likes it or not, she's kind of at the middle of all of it. I don't know that she's the person, because I think other people are at play, including Pendergast. They're all kind of got their fingers in it at this point. But she's definitely one of the prominent players of making sure that, or understanding and pulling all of these out and why they've gotten this far. So there could be a lot of there could be a lot on her shoulder for success. And again, unfortunately, and we've seen this maybe touched on a little bit through the actors. You know, being a woman, there's usually a shorter leash of success here, and what they're willing to give her that extension here. I think for the end of this season, because there's kind of two main deliverables here. One is Andor. We see him achieve this goal, right, of what he's trying to achieve, or what we want him to achieve to get ready for season 2, of why it's important to rebel and why he's a rebel, right? That's kind of question number one. But I think for the Empire, I think this speaks directly to Deidre Miro, is that the Empire has to still feel strong, yet not quite invincible. And so I still think they need that Empire Strikes Back moment. And you could argue they've kind of had it, but that's why I really want to see what happens on Ferrix rather than like a spell house. While spell house is important to an extent, what happens on Ferrix is what's going to cascade through the galaxy when there's a uprising there in direct response to the Empire, and they get involved in more of a riot, and what happens then. And we have an idea of how this is played out in Clone Wars. We've seen it play out in Bad Batch. I think maybe more specifically Bad Batch and a couple other areas. But those are the things I want to see about how much influence does the Empire still have, because I think we still need to see them as a very strong, impenetrable type of entity at this point. Even as viewers, we start to see that there are cracks, and we have characters like Andor who know there are cracks in the system.
So I as far as success goes, like, I think she's already, well, she's going to have success because, like you said, she's turned over Spellhouse, right? Through her work, her research, and her team, they know Spellhouse is not going to happen. The Empire is going to intervene, and you could argue, like you said, that is going to be their kind of Empire Strikes Back moment. I can see them taking that and, taking it and throwing propaganda at it, sensationalizing this in a lot of different ways, even just to cover up what's happening on Ferrix, right? Even if there is an uprising on Ferrix, hey, let's not talk about that because we took care of that. But look what we did over here at Spellhouse. Whether or not we see Spellhouse, I had as a question a little bit later. I don't think we do, and I think that's probably okay. I don't know if there's enough room, honestly, in this episode, depending on the length, to get the
Right.
Spellhouse thing. But it's more about if the Spellhouse has to go down, because yes, it keeps Luthen and Saul safe, but it also builds success for Deidre Miro. And if we want to see her continue moving up the corporate ladder and see her in season 2 and see kind of where her success goes, that is another step in addition to just having already uncovered the rebellion, right? I mean, ultimately, that is what her mission has been. She's been trying to get people to understand that all the pieces are here. All the signs are here that there is a rebellion brewing, starting. And all of these little pieces are important for her to kind of for people to say, okay, yeah, you were right. And I think if they say, yeah, you're right, that's probably enough for her to define success, at least as for this season, right? So I think she's probably already halfway there, 3/4 of the way. So I think she is going to be successful, even if she doesn't capture Andor, even if she doesn't capture Luthen. There's still plenty of other people that are associated with them that they can use, capture that would help her in a lot of ways. I mean, they've already captured what's his name, Pav, or is it Pack? Sorry.
Yeah, Pac.
Yeah, they got Pac. They've got Bix already. We'll see
Right.
what their fate is because I mean, this may turn into a rescue mission at some point to rescue Bix, but they've already gotten some like smaller feathers in their cap at this point. So I'm excited. I do want to see her in season 2. I like to see her. You kind of see where this goes with her character. I think she would get a promotion as well from all of this. I don't know where that looks like if she stays with the ISB or she moves on. We've talked about the year jump that happens between season 1 and season 2. Would be kind of cool to see that already in play as a result of this. What about Lonnie? Do you think we're going to see any more of Lonnie, or was he just there to prove a point that Luthen has people everywhere, and once you're in, you're in. You can never get out? Or do you think there's more to his story to be told either in this season or next season?
Well, I think he's too prominent in the ISB to be forgotten about and to be overlooked. And I think they've insulated and protected him enough. I think he'll continue to show up. How much of a role he continues to play, I think it's probably about what we've seen, in these big gatherings. And he hasn't really subverted anything specifically, I think, in some ways, besides giving information out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for that character to continue to show up, I think it's important for us to see is that he is still there
Yeah.
getting things, but how often is he going back to Luthen? We know there was a year break already, so I don't know why we wouldn't have him in there. And right now, not seeing a reason why they would think they have a mole inside the ISB. So I think he's pretty well insulated and pretty well protected right now, based on especially what we've heard from Luthen so far as well. Now, if you want something that will shake Luthen up, though, is if they do root Lonnie out in some way, that will
Yeah.
shake him to his core, and that would be a great, a great cliffhanger if Luthen were to survive. And I know we'll talk about this here in a bit, but we've always speculated about whether or not Luthen makes it out of season 1
Mm-hmm.
because it would make a lot of sense for him not to. If he were to survive, I would expect a character like Lonnie to be one of those types of characters that, or Krieger's the same way. Of if they don't die, but they're identified, that can make for a really interesting component going into season 2.
Yeah.
But I think with Lonnie, I think he's okay for right now.
Okay. The last character really that I had on this list, unless there's somebody else you want to throw into this group, is Korv, because Korv has been introduced. He's gotten more screen time in the last 2 episodes, maybe 3. And by more screen time, I mean he's had some lines. He's the gentleman that's sitting there.
This
What's
is
that?
Dedra's assistant.
No, this is the guy in Ferrix who's kind of undercover
Oh, yeah.
with
That's right.
Cinta. And, they had the little run-in where they were talking to each other. They're both spying on Marva's house there. I just wonder, are we going to, are we going to see any more of him? To me, he feels like a character that's probably expendable. Like if we had to do a death watch on any of these groups, I think Lonnie lives. I think Iger lives. I think everybody lives. But Korv seems like he's somebody that's expendable because they've placed him in there. He's in the midst of everything. And I don't know. I can see him going because it seems someone's got to die, right? And during this little kind of skirmish battle that's going to happen on Ferrix.
Well, I think that's the question is like, what exactly happens on Ferrix and where does that leave Ferrix? Is Ferrix basically kicking the Empire out? Are they that successful? Because if that's the case, then I could see where Korv is gone. He's dead.
Mhm.
I'm with you though. I mean, there has to be loss on Ferrix, not just, and it has to be someone that we know. Now, granted, I think that also means I think that's someone that we need to know on Andor's side as well. So maybe we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. But, I think Korv pretty much on borrowed time. I would put him on the death watch list.
Okay. Me too. Please die. Please die. Okay, let's
What do you got against him?
I don't know. I just want somebody to die. I don't know what it is. It's the hat. That's what I'm doing. Blaming the hat. Okay, so let's talk about Mon Mothma, Lita. We can throw Perrin in here as well. I have Vel and Cinta separately, but it may make sense to kind of talk about all of these groups, or at least Vel in that same group as well. But okay,
Yeah.
so does she have a plan for Lita's rescue? Right. I went on record as saying like, yeah, she would do this, but only if she had like she thought there was a way out or there was a way to rescue her from all of this at some point. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like that was the case last
Well,
episode.
rescue her from what? From her own choices?
Rescue Lita from this arrangement with Davo.
There's no rescuing her though. She almost wants it, and she's going to be the one that sets it up. So I don't know if there's a rescue.
Well, she doesn't have. I guess the question. Here's
Maybe
the question.
I'm getting hung up on the word. Maybe. Yeah.
What's that?
I'm probably just getting hung up on the word.
Yeah, it's in quotes, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it's the question of does she have an out? Like she didn't want to set up Davo's kid with her. Even if Lita wants it, it doesn't have to be him. She's only doing it because of the credits. So does she have a plan for getting her out? Or has she just sealed her fate and said, I need the money and it's for the greater good and sorry daughter kind of thing and good luck.
Well, I guess let's start with that question then, rather than bury the lead. Does she give in to Davo's wishes?
I think she did. I think that's why we saw her. We saw her crying in that last episode, right?
I don't think we've got confirmation of that though.
Well, no,
she's considering it, but I don't think she's reached out to Davo. That's what I'm trying to say. Do you think that she has confirmed with Davo, yes, bring your son around, but no promises. I'm not getting involved in that stuff.
Yes. I think that's
so you think that's already happened?
That's how I interpreted that scene last week.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I didn't get that impression. I think I still felt more of that. That's the position she's in. It's their only offer at this point still. And she's still told him to kind of bug her off. But she also knows that he wasn't wrong when she lied to him that she wasn't considering that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But until we get confirmation of that, I kept skewing more towards no, not quite yet. But to answer your more specific question, no, I don't think she has a plan for Lita's rescue or for pulling her out of that. And I think part of that is because Lita may not want to be rescued, and at this point wants nothing to do with Mon Mothma, and forcing her out of that environment, especially if she particularly likes the kid, like if they were to be introduced and kind of likes him, he's cute or whatever it might be, then no, there's no rescuing someone that doesn't want rescued. That's kidnapping, I guess. I guess kidnapping your kid. I don't know if that's a thing or not. I guess technically it is, but
probably is not normal, yeah.
Yeah, but unfortunately I don't think it is. And I think with Perrin still lurking in the background, even though he's more open-minded in her words on some of this, I don't think that there is a path for that. I think with Mon Mothma, unfortunately, it's one of these positions where she kind of loses whichever way, whatever choices she has, she loses. And she's trying to find a way that she can avoid that and somehow maybe lose temporarily, but win in the long run. I think is really where her mental shift either already is or needs to happen too. And that's a really terrible trade-off. And it's not that I wouldn't want her to be in the position. And again, for her moral and ethical aspect of her character, I know that's potentially a little inconsistent with what some people might want or expect from her. But given the position that she's in and the really fragile nature of the financial situation, and even though they have 80 million credits, so we've kind of forgot about 80 million credits all of a sudden, which I'm confused where that money is really, what it's actually doing. We've talked a little bit about it, but what is that money actually doing at this point besides just sitting in a ship underground or something? But for her, I think unfortunately it's just she's probably lost her daughter for a time.
Yeah, you brought up the credits thing, and that still bothers me. We talked about it when that happened. We're like, okay, they just stole 80 million.
Yeah, it's been non-existent, right?
Yeah, and then we were like sweating the details over 400K. What? I don't know. Maybe that gets cleared up at some point. I don't think the numbers really probably aren't important, but they kind of do matter.
Well, and from the articles that we were reading, from last week's show, last Patreon show with Tony Gilroy and all them.
Yeah,
the money does matter.
It does matter.
So
yeah.
So I can't imagine it being dropped or forgotten. So I'm not willing to go on a limb and say it was a red herring storyline. It didn't really mean anything. I think it was still important. There's still something behind all of that, but it just doesn't quite jive. And I understand that, like, replacing the credits isn't the problem. It's how you go about doing it to make it seem like nothing's out of the ordinary.
Right.
So just replacing the money is one thing. It's really the moving of the money in order to do that, and where does it come from, and then tracing all of that and keeping all of that on the down low. That's the really difficult part.
Yeah.
And that's why she needs Davo, right? So
yeah. I mean, whether it was 400,000 or 20,000, it's still the same problem.
Yeah, you got cash. How do you get cash into your credit account, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that easy in Star Wars.
So
Not as many ATM machines.
no, they're all controlled by the Empire, as it were. So for Davo, did we expect that he's gonna, stay true to his word, and that's really all he wanted, or do you think at some point this is gonna come up and be like, okay, now I need this from you, or now I need that from you, and is it gonna be this dark cloud that's hanging over her head the entire time? And here's another question, a bonus question that's not in the show notes. I was thinking more about this, and like if she really wanted to shed Davo off once the money's been covered up, do you think like we talked about how it's a slippery slope in some of these dealings, and I don't want to quote Yoda about going down the dark path, but would you put it past her to say, you know what, Saul? There's somebody that's putting us all at risk now because I had to cover up 400,000. Can you just go take care of this guy? Can you see her doing something like that?
Hmm, that's a good question. It wouldn't be to Saw. I think it would be to Luthen. She would tell Luthen that,
Oh, well,
and
yeah.
let
Or maybe
Luthen figure it
Luthen goes
out.
to Saul and says, "Here, go clean this up."
Yeah, I don't know if that's Saw's speed though. And I know when we talked through some of the books and whatnot about what Saw has done. I think at this point it doesn't seem like that's, rescuing a senator from her own poor choices isn't really his his thing, I guess, right now. But I think, yeah, if she were to reach out, and I think at this point, I think she accepts that this is her problem and that she needs to solve it and that she'll live with the consequences. I don't know that she would stoop to that, because I think that would be an actual black mark on Mon Mothma, where if that were to get out that you endorsed the contract killing, if we go to that extreme,
Mhm.
that's irrecoverable. You can't come back from that when it comes to leading a new, yeah, a galaxy.
Yeah.
You can't have that on you, even though Palpatine lives with it, of course.
Oh, he
But
relishes in it. He flourishes.
right,
Yeah.
but he doesn't. But he doesn't care if people know that or not.
Right.
In the background, he might care in some level right now, but at some point he won't. And so I think for Mon Mothma, though, it's very much her character has to remain pure in that way. And I think her making trade offs of her own personal kind of control, her family aspect of things, is a significant enough sacrifice for her, and a significant enough, I mean, character struggle and potentially slight on her character enough to where I think that's still relevant enough for that character to be able to say that's as far as they really need to go. We can't damage the character in any kind of way. And I think taking care of Davo would be a step way, actually probably 2 or 3 steps way too far,
Mhm.
because there's probably a few other things you can't have Mon Mothma directly involved in, or having a conversation and then playing dumb. Like, well, no, we talked about this. We didn't talk about all of these other things that would happen.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, Davo is probably too powerful for a lot of that to happen in some ways anyway.
Yeah, well protected.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just a question. I don't necessarily believe it. Like I'm with you. Like I still believe what I said last week or whatever it was 2 weeks ago about how Mon Mothma has to be like the golden child in this series, right? We can't really
Yes.
tarnish her, and she can't do these types of things. But I just wondered like how if things got really bad. At what point does she fall into, even if it's a moment of weakness, right? But what if she falls into this trap of, well, it's for the greater good? Like it's so slippery once you go down, and that's where Saul's coming from, right? I think you're right. Like right now, this whole greater good thing, I think he's just starting to get on board with it. So I think it's probably too premature to think that he would go do something like that. But by the time we get to Rogue One, I mean, all bets are off. It's all about him and killing the rebellion, and there's spies everywhere. The paranoia is set in. That's a different ball game. But I think right now, I think he still has the wits about him. And I'm with you. I don't know that he would go even sign up to do something like that just yet.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so for I guess Death Watch, do we think Mon Mothma doesn't die? Uh, and Lita, we got Perrin, we've got Davo, we've got Tal
Yeah. I don't think it makes sense for
or
any of those
Tay. Is it
political
Tay?
figures. Tay.
Tay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tay Valma. Yeah. I don't think it makes sense for any of those major characters to die in that way, because they're all political figures. And
Mm-hmm.
again, their loss would resonate in different ways. And I think the only one that maybe you have to, if you were to force me to pick one, I think Tay is maybe one of those people that would be on the Empire watch list at some point, and Perrin might be behind that one. But
Mm-hmm.
for Lita, Mothma, but Perrin, I don't see any of those. Corv, I think, is insulated enough. He's or not Corv, but Davo, safe in that regard as well. But I think if you were to put me on the spot, I would say Tay is probably the most vulnerable here. But they would probably want to watch him closer rather than actually do anything, because again, it's about rooting out the root of all of it, getting to the actual big players, and getting Mon Mothma would be a pretty big deal. So offing him would be counterproductive, I think. So I think this group is pretty well safe.
Okay, yeah, I would agree. Like killing Tay is very short thought, short term, like solution,
very,
right?
very short sighted.
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a quick conversation about Vel and Cinta. And the question I had was about whether or not Vel is going to tell Luthen that what Mothma's done, right? She's privy to what Mothma's done. Is there any reason why she would tell Luthen? Is it because, and I struggle with this one because on one hand, they've kind of established that Lita looks up to Vel way differently than her mom, and that's not uncommon, right? But, I could see an angle of, well, she's trying to protect Lita from what Mon Mothma's done, right? And so she exposes that, then Luthen has to step in, or Luthen. I mean, we asked the question, why wouldn't Luthen just suck it up and help fund the 400,000? I mean, there's a couple different ways this could go, but is there any reason why she would tell Luthen that about what's happened here?
Well, I think she's worried for her cousin. So I think that she might tell Luthen if there's something that he can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very real possibility, because we also know that Vel doesn't play by the rules. And that's what Clay has been calling her out on, is that there are rules we follow, and you seem hell-bent on not following any of them and not caring about them. And so I think that's part of what this is. Now, if Vel shouldn't tell Luthen anything, because that's how this is supposed to work. But I think it's very possible that Luthen finds out if they're able to sync back up here. I don't know what that does or what he does about that, but because Luthen already kind of knows that he's in trouble with Mon Mothma. He knows that there's an issue there.
Yeah.
And Clay is not exactly a huge fan, right? He doesn't know if she's worth the trouble. And now that they're getting a major, crime boss kind of involved, it just seems to get worse and messier. What they're doing is now under the guidance and the it's not private from Davo, right? You presume that he'd be able to dig into things at his own discretion. And so I don't think he would like it very much, but what does he do about it? I don't know. And it's probably a problem for another day.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, there's a difference between Davo knowing that 400,000 needs to be covered up and knowing what that 400,000 would be used for. If he knew what it was used for, and I'm not saying he wouldn't know, maybe he has a way to find out, then I think that's a very different situation for somebody like a Luthen or anybody else that's worried about the risk and exposure of having yet another person being brought into, the circle of sorts, or just being exposed in that way. I think that's very different. If all he knows is that he's got to cover up 400,000, he doesn't know where that money went, then maybe it's not a big deal and they're not really going to, go to extremes in that way.
The interesting part about Davo, though, with this is like he makes a living off of discretion and not getting into other people's business and giving them that privacy and that shadow, realm of where they can operate. And for him, his reputation is very important in that regard. And so I think that's one aspect of why he would not get involved with Mon Mothma stuff. But I think also with what he wants from Mon Mothma, I think this is kind of where you were getting earlier in the show. Does he need more dirt on her about what's going on so that he can blackmail her further into what he wants? And she's already exposed enough now to where if she were to take him up on his offer and actually make the transactions, then he has even more on her that he could pursue that further. And so it's a matter of which one do you think is more important to Davo at this point? And I got to be honest, what he wants for his son and his family and his power aspect of things most likely far outweighs.
Hey everyone, it's Jonesy. We hope you've enjoyed this preview of the Patreon episode. If you'd like to listen to the episode in full, we invite you to head over to cantinacast.com/Patreon. Access to this episode begins at the $2 After Dark tier. If you're interested in joining a future Patreon episode, we encourage you to check out our Now Part of the Tribe and Delusions of Grandeur tiers. You can find all the details at cantinacast.com/Patreon. On behalf of Albert and myself, thank you all for your continued support, and may the Force be with you.